Hello everyone and welcome to Forever Football for today's Premier League table predictions basically. So instead of doing a preview where we go through every team, I'm just going to have an entire look at where I think each team will finish and the projected log of what I think it'll look like at the end of the season, which is going to be quite fun because then obviously at the end of the season we can bring this video back up and we can see where I was wrong, where I was right. Maybe I'm going to get all of this wrong. Maybe I'm going to get most of this right. You never know. So obviously the big ones is who's going to get Champions League, who do I think is going to take the title, who's going to come in the top 10, who's going to get relegated, which teams are going to surprise. You know, what's going to happen. And it's quite difficult to do because the transfer window hasn't finished yet. And I think there are certain teams which right now could be in a lot of trouble, but a signing or two more and suddenly change the entire dynamic. On the other hand, some teams are looking really good, but losing a player or two and suddenly, you know, they're in trouble. So it's quite difficult to do, but obviously with the Premier League starting tomorrow, we can't delay this any further. So without any further ado, this is my predicted table. I'm going to show you the entire table and then we'll sort of break down what's going on from top to bottom and give you my rationale about why I think each team's going to finish where. And hopefully some of my credibility, this touch some wood, will still be intact in a year's time when we review these predictions. Or else it could all go terribly wrong and I have to say, put my hands up to say, sorry about that, I got it very wrong. But let's see what I think is going to happen. So there we go. That is my predicted table for the season. And the big thing is I think Manchester City will win this title. I think that they still, even with especially with the two signings that they've made, and even with David Silva leaving, I still think City, even this last season, has the best squad on paper. The players, the depth they've got, they are the best side in the Premier League. And their demolition of Liverpool post the Liverpool winning the title, yes, regardless of the fact that Liverpool weren't really playing and stuff like that, demonstrated the quality in the side that they have. And Pep Guardiola is not going to have liked the fact that he's lost the league and that he lost the Champions League. And you know, they've already brought in Nathan Ake, so they brought another centre-back. They've already brought in Ferran Torres. And there's big things about whether they're going to bring in Koulibaly or not. And it also looks like Eric Garcia might actually stay. So these are all good news for City. And I think Foden is ready to step up and replace David Silva very well. I think that Leroy Sané is left, but he hardly played last season. And I think that we're going to see, hopefully for a City fan, as a United fan, I don't want this at all. But I'm hoping that Bernardo Silva will probably play a much bigger role for City. But, you know, you think of the way Sterling is playing. Look, Aguero being fit, another big thing. I think he needs to have a season with less injuries. He always seems to have a couple of injuries in him, and he is getting older. But if he can stay fit, if Kevin De Bruyne continues to do what he's doing, I think that City will be too good for the rest. Second place, I've gone with Chelsea ahead of Liverpool. And the reason for me is I think Liverpool were very lucky in that they didn't have a lot of injuries. And I think their squad depth is very, not poor, but it's definitely not as good as it could be and probably needs to be. You know, two major injuries to a Van Dijk and a Mane, and suddenly that Liverpool team is in trouble. And you know, you look at the transfer business, and they've brought in a left back from a Greek left back, and that's it. Look, if they get Thiago, it's a whole different conversation, and I think they are looking quite close. But I just think that Chelsea have been so good in the transfer window, and I mean we saw Lampard last season, how he managed to get that team into tied fourth place on goal difference without any transfers. I mean, yes, Pulisic came in and they had some loans in Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham. Tomori came through, so they were really lucky. They were probably the only sort of side that would have been able to cope with such a ban. But, you know, you look at that front three and, you know, is Mason Mount even going to start? Is Ziyech even going to start? Tammy Abraham's not going to start. So, you know, it's the attacking wise, there's just so much depth in that side. I mean, you could potentially, you're going to have, you know, Pulisic down the left, and we started to see how good he was. Havertz down the right potentially, or Ziyech down the right. You can choose, and then Havertz in the middle, or Mount in the middle. Werner up top, or Tammy Abraham up top. For me, it's just goals, goals, goals. And obviously, the issue that Chelsea had at the back was with the defence. So what do? They go and sign Ben Chilwell. So left back is sorted. They needed a big centre back really boost that thing. So they're going to bring Thiago Silva. They've also signed Malang Sarr, who they've then obviously sent out on loan. But I think lots of people are saying Silva's a big risk signing. I personally think, and we'll have to wait and see. I personally think Silva could be a masterstroke signing for them. I think he's the experience that they need. And look, he will have mistakes in him. There's no doubt about that. He is getting on in years. It is a very tough league to come into at his age. But I think he's got so much experience. He's a natural leader that I think he's just going to add that little bit, that sort of presence. You think of the presence John Terry had, that Vidic has, that Van Dijk has, that Maguire was supposed to have, that Ramos has, that Carlos Puyol used to have, that Chiellini and Bonucci have. Every brilliant team has a centre back which has a commanding presence about them. That's just the sort of standard thing in any really good team. City was struggling. I mean, City were never struggling, but when they brought in Laporte, suddenly it was, now they are a good side. Now they've sort of the final piece of the puzzle. So I think Thiago Silva could be that for Chelsea, and that is why I think that they will pip Liverpool for second place. I think they've got a lot of depth across the squad. Mason Mount's not going to play a lot of. Going to have to fight for a spot. Does Kante stay or does he go? We'll have to wait and see what happens in that one. But I just think with Kovacic, they're all starting to play better. And the thing is, Lampard kind of showed last season that he has the ability to bring out the best in players. We saw this with Mason Mount. We saw this with Tammy Abraham. I think he's still trying to get to grips with what Kante's role is going to be. But even Ross Barkley started to play really well towards the end of the season. And that's the sign of a good manager. And if Havertz, Werner and Ziyech all come off, as well as Thiago Silva, and Pulisic has a really good season. They lost Willian, but that was pretty much it really. And I mean, they're now closing in on a new keeper. So if they can fix that whole part with Kepa, it's just so much good that's happening at Chelsea, and also the confidence that squad will have. They are now ready for a title challenge. Frank Lampard said he did not come to Chelsea to fight for top 4. He came to challenge for titles. So I think they will get second, because I think they're going to be very good this season. I don't think they're going to match City. And I also just think that Liverpool are going to suffer the hangover of winning the league. I think there was so much, we've got to win that league, got to get there, got to get over the line. Even more so than the Champions League was to end that duct. And now they haven't strengthened particularly well. And, Thiago could be coming in, but Ronaldo might be leaving. And I just think that Liverpool will struggle to replicate the standards they had last season. I think they'll be very good, and I think those three will probably be quite a way ahead of the rest of the pack. But I just think Liverpool probably won't have it in them to make it to the sort of second and have another title challenge. I think Manchester United are going to be fourth. This is currently as the Manchester United right now. Bringing in Sancho and a centre-back could completely disrupt this entire thing. I think United have got a really, really good squad, lots of exciting players. I just think we're missing that one or two pieces to really sort of challenge further. And that just comes with the depth, Yes, you've now got Van der Beek coming off the bench, but that's kind of where it is. There are no massively big game changers. There's good players that can come off the bench. You've got McTominay who can come off the bench. You've got Igalo who can come off the bench. You've got Dan James. You've got Fred. But it's you don't think of these sort of big match winners coming off the bench. Whereas if we bring in Sancho, and suddenly you've got Greenwood coming off the bench, or Rashford coming off the bench, Martial coming off the bench, or Sancho coming off the bench, because obviously only 3 of the 4 can start at a time. Suddenly those are match winners off the bench, and it also means that United can rotate the squad a bit more and keep their players fresh. I think Pogba staying fit will be paramount. I think if he stays fit, United should easily get top 4, could actually start pushing for third, second, especially if they can get him to fire around Bruno. The biggest worry is obviously if David De Gea can step up, and he was very good for Spain, so there's no doubt that he still can be at his best. But I think Henderson pushing him will be a good thing. Luke Shaw needs to stay fit. Wan-Bissaka needs to do more on the attack, and Harry Maguire and Lindelof, they probably need some more centre-back cover. So I just think depth is the reason that United are going to be slightly off the other 3. 5th place, I'm actually backing Spurs. I think Mourinho will. He has struggled and he's shown his issue, but I think now that he's had settled, the biggest problem with Spurs, I think they haven't had a particularly good transfer window thus far. I mean, if you look at the transfers, the only people they've brought in Doherty, so they brought in a right back. They've brought in. Obviously, Lo Celso is now sort of is permanent now. They brought in Højbjerg. They brought in Joe Hart. But that's pretty much it. And so it's not a lot. And I think Mourinho would have wanted more because obviously they lost Vertonghen. But so I think it's difficult. I just think that if Harry Kane stays fit and Son is playing some really good football and Dele Alli is starting to look good again, attacking wise, I think they'll be solid enough to get fifth. I think they've got reasonable depth. I think Mourinho would like to spend a lot more money and bring in better centre backs, but I think now that he's going to have a bit of a pre-season, he's going to have more time to work with them. Mourinho, I think, will be able to steer them to fifth. I think he'll be able to grind out results, and it's such a make or break season. He's got so much to prove this season because people are saying that he's past it. He's not good enough for the Premier League anymore, and this is the end of Mourinho. So this season is his chance to show that he can still do it. And I think they can get fifth. Arsenal for me are going to come sixth. I just think that, look, again, also not fantastic transfer business so far. They brought in Gabriel, which is a really good signing for them. But who's going to partner him? It becomes the issue. David Luiz is obviously. I mean, they're going into the season with a lot of injuries. Willian's come in, which is a decent move. And obviously Saliba coming back, and who will likely partner Gabriel for the season. But again, he's 19 years old, and it's his first season in the Premier League, so he's going to struggle. And this is why I think Arsenal will progress with the performances on the pitch this season, and I think Arteta will start to get the best out of them. But I just think that they don't have the quality across the squad to be in that top four yet. It could be very wrong. It comes down to whether Arteta can get, can Aubameyang refine that the form of the season. Will Willian be able to chip in as much as they can? What's going to happen? Can Saka step up, make that next step up? Obviously, Martinelli is coming back from injury only next year. At this stage, Pablo Mari is also still injured for a while. So I just don't think that they've brought in enough to really challenge for higher honours. If they went and got, there's a couple of players they've been linked to. Thomas Partey, Houssem Aouar. If they brought in some players like that, then I think they could be top four. But I just don't think they've got the quality across the squad to move up. Everton are 7th. I think they could be a dark horse, though. There's no reason why Everton can't go and pip Arsenal. Ancelotti is doing a lot of good deals. I mean, he's already brought in Allen, Doucouré, Nkunku from Marseille, and James Rodriguez on a free transfer. And they're not looking like they're stopping. They are still linked with quite a few different players. Hirving Lozano is a name that's being linked now to Everton. And I think, Ancelotti is one of the most successful managers of all time. There's also some very good youngsters at Everton, and he started to give them more chances towards the end. If he can bring out a Tomori on loan or a John Stones, and help shore up the back there, and then get them firing at the front, there's no reason that Everton can't become the Everton of old, where they were always sort of in and around, and sometimes they would sort of sneak into that 6th or get 5th. I think they could do it. They've done some really good business. We all know they've got some really talented players there. I think this season will be the make or break of Calvert-Lewin, and I think he's going to have a very good season. I think Ancelotti really rates him, and I think that as a result, he's going to score lots of goals. I think Wolves will be 8th. I just think the Wolves, they struggle a bit with the depth again. Look, and they finally started getting into the transfer market. They just spent a record transfer fee on a wonder kid. They've just gotten 2 players from Porto, a couple of players on loan. But I just think that Wolves will struggle. I just don't think that. It comes down to whether can James Rodriguez, can Raul Jimenez carry them again? What will Traore do this season? It comes down to those two. If those two can repeat the seasons they had last season, they can probably go further than 8th. But I think that they will pip Leicester, and I think they will sort of be in the top 10. Leicester, the reason I have Leicester down at 9th is because they just haven't done any transfer business. They brought in Tim Castagna from Atalanta, which was a decent thing, but that was just a Ben Chilwell replacement. So they've lost Chilwell, brought in. But apart from that, they haven't made any big signings, which is their biggest problem, because I just think that the depth was the reason they fell off. They had a really good start to the season and they were doing very well, but they just didn't have the squad to continue competing. And I think that'll be the same issue now. If you look at the log of this year, of the second half of the season, Leicester weren't even in the top 10. I think they won only about 2 Premier League games all year. So such was the fall off of the season, the drop off, and Jamie Vardy carried them through because he had a sensational season. But if he can't repeat that, then Leicester are going to suffer. 10th, I've got Southampton, and that is because that whilst they haven't potentially made amazing signings, their form in the last second half of the season started showing what they could be like. I mean, they were in the relegation scrap, and then if you look at the a Premier League table of this year, Southampton I think was seventh. Because Hasenhüttl really started to get them playing well, and Danny Ings was really starting to play well, and Hasenhüttl was finally starting. He had a very good start, and then a bit of a tough time, and then towards this last end of the season, he had a really good period. And they brought in Kyle Walker-Peters. They brought in Mohamed Salisu from Valladolid. So I mean, they haven't made a lot of big signings, but I think that Hasenhüttl's got a really good project going in there. I think he's starting to get the best out of players. And, as a United fan, we saw that Southampton pitched up. They are a very good side. James Ward-Prowse is playing some very good football at the moment. Danny Ings is in the form of his life back again, So there's no reason they can't do that. Burnley I'm putting at 11th, which could be quite high for them. But, Sean Dyche just seemed to have a knack for being able to grind out results. They were the only ones that went to Anfield and got a point. So they've got that ability. The problem is that they literally have not signed anybody. Like, they brought in Will Norris as a reserve keeper, but that is literally all they have signed. So there's a big standoff now between Dyche and the board, where Dyche is saying, I need players, and the board's not budging, and they can't bring anybody in. But I do think that Dyche is such a good manager, and they're such a difficult team to break down, that they can sneak into 11th. I'm then going to go with Newcastle, simply because of the spend that they've had the last few days. Bringing in Ryan Fraser, Callum Wilson, they've suddenly gone and made some very good signings. And they started to play quite well under Steve Bruce. So it's not quite been this big takeover, bring in Gareth Bale, bring in Cavani, type thing. But they have made some good transfers. And they were starting to play well. I mean, Almiron's starting to come around. St. Maxim looks a really, really good player. Joe Linton, I think, will be a lot better this season. He was quite disappointing. But I just think that they've strengthened in the right areas, and I think they will improve. I don't quite think they'll be in the relegation scrap. Just as I think Sheffield United won't necessarily be in the relegation scrap, but will obviously be quite a big fall-off. And I think it's one of those things where your first Premier League season, there's so much motivation, there's so much thing to not go down, that players usually play a lot better than they would have. And now they're sort of suffering that sort of, well, we're safe. We didn't quite make European football, so the goal for them will be to be safe again. They lost Dean Henderson, but they did bring in Aaron Ramsdale. And they've got Ethan Ampadu from Chelsea on loan. But then the only other players they brought in is two fullbacks from Derby, in Max Lowe and Jayden Bogle. But yeah, I mean, there's no reason they can't continue doing what they did last season. It's a very well coached side. It's a very nice style of football. But I think that motivation-wise, they managed to stay safe. And it's very rare that teams like that repeat a season like that. So I think 13 is quite a safe sort of place where they'll stay up, and I don't think they'll be in much of the relegation scrap, but I just don't think they'll be able to reach the levels of last season. 14, I'm going Leeds United. I think they've done some very good signings, and they could go any higher. They're also a bit of a dark horse. They brought in Rodrigo from Valencia, as well as Helder Costa, and they're also looking at Rafinha from Barca. So they're trying to, and also linked to Romero from United. So they are trying to bring in some big players, and obviously we all know that Marcelo Bielsa is a very, very good manager. So I don't think they'll be in the relegation scrap. And look, they could go a lot better, but obviously being the first time in the Premier League for so many of those players, it can take a while for them to adjust. Look, they could very well do a Sheffield and finish 8th, 9th. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But at this stage, I think that they'll comfortably stay in the Premier League, but I don't quite think they'll push top 10. But if they can build on the season, then I reckon they could very well be top 10, if not top sort of 7, 6 next season. Start pushing for a European spot, because that is the whole project that they are pushing for. West Ham are 15th for me. I'd be surprised if they do much better than that. I mean, they've only brought in Thomas Sukek from Prague, and so not a lot of signings there. And it's just a side which has got decent players, but aren't really coming off. And I think Moyes is going to be under quite a lot of pressure, and I think this is sort of where the relegation scrap. I do think West Ham will be in the relegation scrap. They just haven't brought in a lot of players, and they're always a bit of a strange team where they've got the players, but they just haven't quite come off yet. And I think this could be another season of that. I've got Brighton down at 16th. They could also do a lot better, but their form wasn't great at the end of last season. They brought in Lallana on a free, which is a very good signing, as well as I think a player from Ajax and a player from the Dutch Championship, basically the tier 2, basically. But they haven't brought in a lot of players, so. Yeah, I think look, they got Ben White back from Leeds, who's very good, but I think I just don't see them pushing for much higher than that, unless they make a few more signs towards here. I think Graham Potter's done a good job, but I think he'll keep them safe, but I don't see them pushing very high. I've got Crystal Palace down at 17th, and I'll tell you why. It all comes down to, can they keep Zaha? Because if Zaha leaves, they're relegation candidates, in my opinion, automatically, basically. And at this stage, it looks like he might stay. But he's said so many times that he's keen to leave and he wants to go to a big club. And as the transfer window goes towards the end, there might be some desperate signings, and he could be on the way out. And if that's the case, I think they'll really struggle. They brought in a striker forward from QPR. He's very highly rated, but again, he's going to have to try and make a step up. And I just don't think that Palace have the depth and the quality to go much further. I think there will be a relegation scrap. I'm predicting Fulham to go down. Fulham's a strange one. They've made some really good signings. They brought in Alfonso Areola from PSG on loan with an option to buy, which is a great signing. They then got Anthony Knockaert from Brighton, Harrison Reed from Southampton. They've brought somebody from Olympique Lyonnais, as well as a couple, I think, from West Brom and Southampton. And so I think, look, Scott Parker's doing good things, but they snuck into the Premier League. And I think that Fulham also are often guilty of bringing in a lot of players, and then, it also goes haywire. I don't think it'll be as the same sort of case as last time, because I think Scott Parker's got quite a solid plan. And I'd like to see them stay up simply because I like Scott Parker. Not because I'm a massive Fulham fan, to be honest. I think Mitrovic is back in the Premier League, and I think he'll enjoy it, and I think he'll score a lot of goals. So he could keep them up almost single-handedly, but unless they make some few more signings, then I don't see them staying up. Villa, I also think, will go down. They bought Ollie Watkins from Brentford, so they have bought that striker that they've needed. But I just don't. I mean, they shouldn't actually be in the Premier League. If VAR was working properly, they would have been relegated, and they deserve to be relegated because bar Jack Grealish, they did not play very well last season. I think my money's on Dean Smith being the first to get the sack. I think Aston Villa will start poorly and they'll be into panic stations again. And I think they needed to do more in the transfer window than they have. I mean, besides Ollie Watkins, they brought in Matty Cash from Nottingham Forest, so Championship right back, James Bree, and then a goalkeeper. So they haven't brought in a lot of players. Jack Grealish looks like he will stay because nobody's going to pay the fee for him. But you never know. Maybe somebody does go and snap up Jack Grealish or like a Tyron Mings or something like that. So, I don't see them staying down. And then for me, West Brom will be down. West Brom just continue to be a bit of a nothing team for me. They always float a bit in and about. They haven't made incredible signings. They're always there and thereabout. They did finish higher than Fulham in the Championship, but I just think it's a bit of a strange team where they never quite made it and quite established themselves as Premier League teams. And I don't. You look at the squad. Compared to other squads, I just don't see them competing at this stage. So that's what I think. So screenshot it, clip it, save it in the back. This is what I'm predicting. This is what I think is going to happen. It could all be very, very wrong. And at the end of the season, we can put this table next to the official table, and we can look at what went wrong, what went right in terms of my predictions. But I want to know what your predictions are. So let me know in the comments what you think of the predictions itself. Where do you think is going to happen? Which ones do you think are wrong? Which do you think is right? Do you agree? Don't you agree? Who's going to win the title? Who's going down? All that. Such an interesting season to come. So excited for football back tomorrow. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel down there. All the links to our various social medias are also in the description, so make sure you go and follow us on that. As always, have a very good weekend, and I'll chat to you very soon for what's going to be a fantastic weekend of football. So I hope everybody's ready for it, and all the best for a fantastic weekend as we celebrate the Premier League returning.